Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us on this cold November night. My name is Chris Chop. I'm from the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues here this evening. Belinda, to your right at the laptop. She's our project manager on this effort. We've got Sarah over there as well, a couple other team members, Clara and Lucy. And tonight we're focused on our region-wide Vision Zero effort. And we'll get into that in a minute, but first wanted to thank the town of Yarmouth and the American Legion for hosting us this evening. And this meeting is being recorded, as you probably gathered, and should be posted online at a later date. So we're excited to have you all tonight. This is our third workshop in a series of 4 to 5 workshops around the Portland region, talking about a really important topic, Vision Zero, which is an effort that started in Sweden in the 1990s, really to commit to zero deaths and zero crashes involving serious injuries, all the way to zero. And Sweden has had a lot of success since 1990. It's really gained momentum and traction throughout Europe and the world, and in parts of the United States as well. And it's more than just a goal of getting down to zero. And it's more than a philosophy. It's also kind of flipping the script a little bit and thinking about crashes a little bit differently, not calling them accidents, calling them crashes, what they really are, and making a more deliberate and conscious effort to focus on designing our roadway network for all users, and thinking about things a little bit differently, and balancing trade-offs between motor vehicle travel times and also really safety and prioritizing safety and not just vehicular speed. So I wanted to mention the plan for the evening. I'm going to hand it over to Belinda in a minute, who will kind of go into Vision Zero in a little bit more detail. We've got pizza, I think most of you know at this point. So help yourself at any point. Just get up and grab a slice. Don't be shy. And there's one bathroom available as well behind Lucy and Clara. And one other thing I wanted to share is a video that our communications team put together. And before we play that, just want to mention that, a lot of times when we're talking about roadway safety, we really hone in on statistics. As a regional transportation planner, a lot of my work centers around, and our work centers around statistics. So we look at, crash trends nationally, statewide, and in our region, all of which are increasing. Fatalities are going up, but sometimes I think we lose sight of the human stories behind some of these crashes and the human toll that these crashes have on our communities and our community members, and we want to help tell those stories. So we went around our region and interviewed people just very casually and impromptu way and asked them if they've been involved in a crash that resulted in a fatality or a serious injury. And here are some of those stories that we heard. We'll want to say that this video it's powerful, and these stories are very powerful, but they're also really upsetting. And I know, Aaron, you've seen this a couple of times now, so I just wanted to acknowledge that before we jump in. So go ahead, Belinda.
I've wrecked a few cars by being intoxicated.
Someone had rear-ended us.
And I was taking a bend a little too fast, and I hit the curb and the car rolled.
Sort of run off the road when riding my bike.
I was T-boned in an intersection with my mom.
I was hit by a car on Baxter Boulevard on a bicycle.
I know a couple people who've been hit by cars while they were biking or walking.
The car behind me stopped, and it was within 2 feet of my car. The third car behind was doing 65 miles an hour. She totaled 3 cars and messed up my neck. I got 3 plates in my neck now.
Luckily, I hit them, didn't come into the side of the car, but the car in front of me, and there was a fatality that the person in the back seat behind the driver died because of the impact.
One of my friends was just killed in a motorcycle accident, crashed his motorcycle at about 1 in the morning in June.
I lost my 23-year-old daughter in Portland, Maine. On November 1st, 2016, she got hit by a distracted driver, and she died 9 days later.
How many people do you think should be killed or seriously injured in traffic crashes?
Should be 0.
0. None.
0. I think people should be staying alive.
Well, in the perfect world, yeah, nobody gets hurt.
0. Nobody should have to die in traffic accidents. I would love it that nobody was to have to die.
None. There really shouldn't be accidents.
I think that should be 0, yeah.
A 0 is a pretty good number, I think.
Should be 0.
It's a daily struggle every day to live without her. So to the people out there, come together and make a change, so we have 0 deaths.
Thank you. And we wanted to provide an opportunity. There'll be different opportunities for input this evening. We've got mapping exercises after Belinda's presentation where we can huddle around a couple maps in the different communities. We've got Falmouth at one table. I think Falmouth's on the left. Yep. And then Yarmouth, North Yarmouth, and then Freeport back here. But we also welcome anyone to come up to the podium if you're so inclined to share a story of a crash that you were involved with, or maybe it's someone that was near and dear to you. Certainly no pressure to do so at all, but we want to provide a time and space for that if anyone wants. I'm not seeing any takers, and I understand, but we look forward to your input at the mapping exercise. Yes, sir.
My first crash was at the Yarmouth post office.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but nobody will be able to hear you unless you go to the mic.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sorry. It's because it's being recorded. We need people to speak into the microphones.
So my first crash was, I think, the second or first day I learned about these things called clips on bicycles. And I was at the Yarmouth post office, and I swung in, and the first thing I saw was somebody I knew. And I thought, oh, great. And I forgot all about having to unclip. So I did one of those, on my left, and I fractured my wrist in doing so. And I tried to get out of it, but I didn't understand that my son had been mountain biking the week before, and he had tightened them up so he wouldn't come out of them. So it's just one of those situations where sometimes you have crashes and they're not too serious. I've never been involved. I've been riding actively for a good 25, 30 years. The only serious crash I had was when I was riding a bike down in Clearwater Beach down in Florida, where not an interstate, but a 4-lane highway, and I had 2 lanes going one direction. I was in the right-hand lane, which I always stay on the right-hand lane, and the lane ended without any foreknowledge, no signs or anything, and there was a 4-inch curb, and I slammed into that about 30 miles an hour. Fortunately, was able to stay upright, didn't fall or anything, didn't get hurt. The bike got squeezed in half, and I had to throw it away. But in all those years of riding, nothing fatal. I think part of it is I'm just really conservative about what I do when I ride. I watch people's eyes, and when you get kind of a blank look back, you know you're in trouble. So you do things defensively, like somebody who's coming to a stop sign, obvious stop sign, you've got the clear way to go through, and you look at her, and you look at her, and and sure enough, she goes right by. She doesn't see you. So you just have to have your antenna up when you ride, and I've done that over the years, and so far, I'm still vertical.
Thanks for sharing. Belinda, I'm going to turn it back to you to go through some of the presentation here, which will kind of tee up the mapping exercise so we can get a little bit more input from you all. But I think this additional context will help you kind of understand what we're working on and how we're hoping to get to 0. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And so that is the question. How do we get to 0, right? Well, with Vision 0. And Vision 0, as Chris mentioned, is a strategy to end all deaths and serious injuries on our roadways, and it does involve flipping some of our assumptions kind of on their heads. So we will come back to this slide momentarily, but first I just want to look at a couple of roads that you might recognize that might give you an idea of what roads look like when we design them the way we've been designing them, which is primarily with moving cars in mind. So here's the first location. Does anyone recognize this location? It is in this region. Oh, I see some nods. I see some nods. I'll give you a hint. I think there's a McDonald's up there on the right. A very non-traditional McDonald's. Yeah, so this is Freeport. It's Mallet Drive, kind of looking east where it intersects with Route 1. And it seems like a pretty simple road, but remember, in addition to the goal of eliminating deaths and serious injuries from our roads, Vision Zero is also looking to increase safe, healthy, equitable mobility for everyone who might use a road. So biking, walking, whatever, however you're getting around, transit, cars. But if you look at this, you can see that there might be some challenges for pedestrians and cyclists here, right? Because we have no sidewalks. And one of the reasons I did choose this is because there have been 2 cyclist-involved crashes this year in this location, both of which resulted in injuries. So let's look at one more. Does anyone recognize this location? I do see some nods again. Oh yeah, I heard it. Tuttle Road. Yep, this is where Tuttle and Middle come together. And this is a really interesting one. Middle Road is, so we are looking, Tuttle is like what we would be on right here. Middle is the one that's crossing, and Middle has stop signs on both sides there. And in fact, on the right side where Middle comes in, there are 2 stop signs. There's one on each side. And you see that's usually an indicator people aren't always stopping here. We had to add an extra stop sign. And the way the roads are built, you can kind of see here the way that Tuttle, that's not a 90-degree turn. It's almost like you don't really have to slow down, just keep going. And it's the same thing coming in the other direction. You don't really have to slow down. You can make that turn pretty easily, and I think people might do that sometimes. This one, I believe also, there have been 3 crashes resulting in injuries at this location this year. So that's one of the reasons I chose this one. So those are roads that are really, it'd be hard to ride a bike, it'd be hard to walk in that area, and cars are not always getting through here successfully either. So now we'll go back to this. Yeah?
Can you just speak to the specifics of those accidents, if you have the details? Was it bicycles coming down Tuttle?
So this one was not, I don't think this one involved bicycles. These 3 were all in the intersection, cars. Okay. The other one had 2 cyclists involved, and that's really what I know about them. So as I said, Vision Zero does kind of take assumptions and flip them on their head. So one of the assumptions that it changes is this idea that traffic deaths are inevitable and the serious injuries are inevitable. So often if you hear that there's been some kind of a crash and someone's been injured, we say, oh, what happened? And when we start to hear the causes, what we expect and what we hear is, well, that person ran the red light, the cyclist didn't stop at the intersection, this person was on her phone, that person was intoxicated or distracted. We always focus on the human error, what somebody did wrong, and we say, well, that is a tragic accident, and then we move on. But with Vision Zero, we look at these as crashes, as Chris said, not accidents. And we say that these deaths and these serious injuries are not inevitable. When we call them accidents, we kind of make it sound like, not much we can do. Crashes have causes that we can understand and then try to design better. With the traditional approach, we kind of think, well, we're always going to have these problems until humans have perfect behavior. If everybody did everything right, we wouldn't have these crashes. With the Vision Zero approach, we integrate human failing into our design. We say people are going to make mistakes, and we have to design around them. We have to design to account for human fallibility. We also, with Vision Zero, we focus really on serious crashes, ones that result in serious injuries and fatalities. We don't look to prevent every single fender bender. We understand some small things will happen. We focus our resources where they can do the most good, where we can really get down to zero serious injuries and fatalities. And this thinking, as Chris said, has been successful in other areas, and our Federal Highway Administration has embraced the Vision Zero approach to the extent that in 2013, they kind of created their own version of it, and it is called the Safe System approach. And this is a diagram of the Safe System approach right here. You can see that it takes a holistic view of the road system, and the way that it's set up here, we have the 5 elements of crash risks on the inside and 6 principles on the outer ring. Those 6 principles are really similar to some of the Vision Zero approach that we just looked at. And so we'll take a closer look at the 6 principles first. But I did want to just highlight that saying on the side there, safety is an ethical imperative of the designers and owners of the transportation system. And that's written right into our national safety guide now. So the 6 principles are, first, that death and serious injury is unacceptable, that humans make mistakes, that humans are vulnerable, responsibility is shared. Everyone who's involved in the transportation system is responsible for making sure it's safe, whether you're using the system, designing the system, managing it, or legislating around it, you have a role to play. Safety is proactive. We have to identify and mitigate the risk in our system now, not wait for crashes and then react to them. And redundancy is crucial. We need to make sure that all the elements of our transportation system are strengthened so that if one piece fails, people are still protected. So I'm going to take a second and just look at one of these core principles in greater depth, and that is humans are vulnerable. And it's kind of obvious, right? Human bodies we're soft shell creatures. We can't really withstand great forces and impacts. And so we design our vehicles so that they have airbags and seat belts, and so that they have technology to help us avoid crashes. We need to make sure that we design the cars to be safe for people who are in them, but we also need to make sure that we are accounting for the people outside of vehicles. We talk about those folks who are not in vehicles, but using roads as our most vulnerable users. And that's because if you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist or you're a skater, you're on your one wheel going down the road trying to get to work, you're not encased in metal and plastic, and you are much more vulnerable. And that shows up in our crash data. If we check this out, we see at the top that pedestrians and cyclists are only involved in 2% of all crashes. But then if you look down at the bottom at the fatalities, between pedestrians and cyclists, they make up 81% of the fatalities. Only 19% of the fatalities are people that are in cars. And that's good for being in the cars. It means the cars are pretty safe, but it also means that the cars are very dangerous to the people who are not inside of them. So that's humans are vulnerable. We will also look at redundancy is crucial. But before I get into that one, I need to talk about those 5 elements that are in the center of this diagram. So the 6 principles that are on the outside, those are the foundations. Those are our truths. That's what we're trying to, factor in here. The 5 elements are encompassing every aspect of crash risk. And if we get these 5 elements right, we will have optimum safety. So the first one is safe road users. Whether you're walking, biking, driving, riding transit, or traveling by another mode, we want you to be safe and make safe choices. Safe vehicles. Vehicles should be designed with safety features to minimize crashes and, when there are crashes, to minimize impacts. Safe speeds. We need the right speed for the right context, and we need to design roads that encourage people to drive at those right speeds. Safe roads. We want the roads to be in good shape, but we also want them designed to anticipate human error. We want the roads to have safety features as well. And post-crash care. When crashes do occur, we need to make sure we have good emergency medical services in place, good traffic incident management, and we need forensic analysis at crash sites so we can figure out what happened and make sure we can plan better and learn from it. So with those 5 elements in mind, we will just go back to this principle: redundancy is crucial. And we'll get to my favorite slide here, the Swiss cheese model of redundancy. And if you look at this, you can see that each layer of the cheese, the holes are in a different place. And so it's hard for something to get all the way through the 5 slices of Swiss cheese. On the right, everything failed. All of our elements of crash risk failed. We had an unsafe road user who was distracted or intoxicated, driving an unsafe old vehicle with no safety features, lights that didn't work, going at an unsafe speed on a 6-lane road with a center turn lane, no sidewalks, the road is full of potholes, there's no lighting, and the first responders weren't able to get there for 45 minutes, and when they did, they had the wrong equipment. Okay, that would be failing at every level. That is very unlikely. If we are working to get these elements in place, more likely than not, somewhere you're going to get bounced out and you're not going to get all the way through and have a fatality or a serious injury. So on the left, you can assume same circumstances for those first 3, but that 4th slice is safe roads. So this road was designed well, and that is what kept us safe. The road maybe was designed to keep pedestrians and vehicles separate. Maybe there was something to keep people from crossing the center line, some kind of a median, maybe rapid flashing beacons that drew attention to people who were waiting to cross, or there were speed humps or paint that made the road narrower and encouraged people to drive more slowly. So the safe road is the element that held and kept us all safe there. So that is what we're talking about when we talk about the safe system approach, which again is the Federal Highway Administration's version of Vision Zero and what we're trying to work with here. So then the other thing that I want to talk to you about tonight is why we're even doing this, why we're talking about it. And I think you probably know it's because we have a lot of crashes and a lot of people dying on our roadways. Between 2011 and 2020, more than 370,000 people died in transportation incidents, and more than 350,000 of them were on our roads. And things are not trending in the right direction. We had around 50,000 fatalities back in the 70s and 80s, hovering around 40,000 through the 90s and early 2000s. We hit a low of about 32,000, you can see here, in around 2010. But we're ticking back up. And it's not because we're driving more. If you look at that orange line, that's fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And the number's going up. And that means that we're having more fatalities without more miles. So we are just having more fatalities on our roads. And as we mentioned before, they are disproportionately impacting pedestrians. So you can see this, since 2009, the number of pedestrians killed on our roadways has increased by 62%. In 2021, it was nearly 7,500 people killed while walking on our roadways. And you saw at the beginning, about 43,000 people died in traffic-related crashes last year. In Maine, we had 150 people die in crashes on our roads, 20 of them pedestrians or cyclists. And so far in 2022, as of November 7th, I didn't look again today to see if that's changed, but we have had 147 deaths. And last year, on November 7th, there were 132. So we are above last year's pace at this point. And then just a final one, with traffic deaths on the rise, people are asking psychologists to help make driving safer. And this is just an interesting quote from Kyra Mouseth, who is a clinical psychologist at Seattle University. People's brains are not perceiving information and processing emotion in the way they did prior to the pandemic. People might be a little more impulsive, they're a little bit less regulated, and they might not be considering consequences. So for all of these reasons, we are here to talk about safety on our roadways tonight, and the first step to get to zero is to create an action plan to help us get there. So what is in an action plan? There are some key elements. You have to have specific goals, targets, and milestones. Of course, the ultimate goal is zero, but we don't expect to adopt Vision Zero and be there tomorrow. It takes time to implement the things we need to implement, and so we would set some targets and some milestones along the way. Safety analysis. We are doing that right now, looking at existing conditions and trends, and that helps us so we can set a baseline so that as we move forward, we can compare and find out, are we making progress? We need to have some engagement and collaboration so that we hear from people from a lot of different perspectives as to where they find the roads unsafe, what they think should be done, and that's one of the things we're here for tonight. And one of the things we will do as we develop this plan is incorporate specific strategies, but also specific projects. We will look and find where are the areas where we need to focus our resources, because funding is always difficult to come by. So it will be very helpful if we have specific projects in mind that will help us get to zero, and we focus there first. And then finally, a method to measure and report on our progress. And that is something that we will work in there as well. So we are working on these phases at this point in time, and the engagement and collaboration is what you're here for tonight. So I am going to introduce Lucy Sinclair. She is going to have you do a mapping activity, and she'll explain how that will work.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here tonight. So as you might have seen while you were walking in, we have 3 maps out on the tables here, and we want to hear from you, your experience in your communities. So there are stickers out there that you can put on places where you feel unsafe biking and walking, places where you feel unsafe driving, and then if you have places where you feel safe biking and walking or safe driving that you would like to see more places like that, you can mark those as well. We also have sticky notes out there, pens, markers. You can feel free to write on the map, or if you are feeling a little hesitant, put it on a sticky note. And we'll take about 15 minutes to do this. And then we'll call you back, share some of what we've found looking at the data in the region, and then have an opportunity for you to share what you have been seeing in your region. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing. I heard a lot of great conversations going on, and we'll be able to come back to those and share out in a few minutes. Before we do that, I want to share some of the trends as well as locations that we have found looking at some crash data. So I'll start out more broadly. So in 2021, in our region, which is made up of those 18 municipalities on the right there, there were over 7,000 crashes in the region, and this is just in 1 year. No, that's all crashes. 15 people died on the region's roads, and 4 of those were pedestrians and cyclists. 132 people were severely injured. And when I say severely injured, that's a incapacitating injury. So the injured person wasn't able to walk away from the scene themselves. They had to be helped, put in an ambulance, something like that. And that was a 4-year high. And 30 pedestrians and cyclists were severely injured, which was the highest in 7 years. Here is a map of the concentration of those crashes, and that's all crashes. And then in the towns that we're looking at today, there were a total of 64 severe injuries and 12 fatalities. This is 2016 to 2021, so a bit of a larger range there. And then in 2021, there were 771 total crashes that led to 14 severe injuries and 2 fatalities. 8 of those, the overall crashes, involved pedestrians and cyclists. And 23% of fatal or severe injury crashes involve pedestrians or bicyclists, despite the fact that only 1% of all crashes involved bikes or pedestrians. And then looking at some trends, this is for the region overall. Looking at the data, we saw that most severe crashes happen in clear weather on dry roads during daylight hours, so it's not those external factors that we generally associate with crashes. They occur more often on roads with more lanes, and sort of as the lanes increase, so does the occurrence of crashes. Looking at speed limit, the most dangerous speed limit was 30 miles per hour. Fatal and severe crashes are 2.64 times more likely to happen on roads with speed limits of 30 miles an hour. This is probably because those roads, this is the speed limit, not necessarily the speed that people are going. And those are roads that we tend to see still in more local contexts. It's not like a separated highway. So there's a lot more possibility for conflicts with pedestrians and cyclists on roads like that. Fatal and severe crashes are 4.59 times more likely on arterials. Those are roads that are built to move large volumes of traffic from more local roads to highways. And looking at pedestrian crashes specifically, 68% of pedestrian crashes happen while the pedestrian is crossing. I think that makes sense. As a pedestrian, you feel a lot more vulnerable when you're crossing the road. And 51% of those crashes occur in places where there's no signal or crosswalk. So we can look at where those are happening as a way to point us towards where there might be more infrastructure for pedestrians needed. And now we're going to look at some specific locations.
So Belinda covered this a little bit before, some of the typical kinds of roads where we see crashes happening. So I just wanted to pick an example from each of the towns that we're looking at today to kind of show you the trends we've noticed and some examples. So looking at this intersection here in Freeport, it's School Street and Main Street. So you're just kind of getting on the outskirts of town. Here's what that looks like on the ground. You can see there was a bike pedestrian injury here. So again, as Lucy mentioned, it's a local context that's kind of conflicting with the people maybe coming off of Mallet Drive that we looked at earlier, people getting to the outskirts of town and feeling the road widening and like they can go a little bit faster. Looking at Yarmouth, there were a couple of crashes up near the History Center and the Whirl River Park. So there was one bike injury here, and then there was one, so that's the gray dot, and then above it, the blue dot was a crash where 2 people were severely injured in a vehicle. So looking on the grounds here, you can see it's, again, an open, paved environment that maybe people would feel more comfortable going faster above the speed limit of 25 here. And the speed limit actually right over that bridge increases to 30 miles per hour. So maybe, people are familiar with that, or it's just kind of opening up again. And the big turn in the road also limits visibility. And there's people crossing between the History Center and the park. And here in Cumberland, we were looking along Main Street. There was a severe injury pedestrian crash. And then on either side of those, outside of that yellow circle, there were 2 pedestrian crashes. Or sorry, those were 2 cyclist crashes, and in the middle is the pedestrian crash. And again, the speed limit here is 30 miles per hour, which Lucy mentioned is the deadliest in our region. And again, it's just those competing priorities of traffic throughput on a road like State Route 9 that's also a very local road that has bike pedestrian access. There's a school right down the road from here, and a school zone ahead. These next ones are a little bit different. They're more rural. So looking in North Yarmouth, there was a cyclist who was severely injured at this intersection here. And looking on the ground, you can see there's hardly any shoulder, not a very forgiving spot to kind of have an interaction with a vehicle as a cyclist. And then Blackstrap Road in Falmouth is another one that I'm sure if you're familiar with it, you wouldn't want to walk or bike on it. The speed limit here is 35 miles per hour. And we saw a couple of cars going off the road here. One of them, it was noted that they were exceeding the posted speed limit. And further down the road, the blue dot on the bottom right was a cyclist who was injured. So again, not very much room for error on a road like this. So I'll hand it back over to Belinda, but we'd love to hear more of your thoughts about any of these areas or others that you put on the maps. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's annoying, but can you ask it at the podium? Just so that, or any of these microphones. You could just, any microphone in the room. Thank you. They are all on. Yeah.
I was just, because I heard you say that the deadliest is 30 miles an hour in this region. Is that different across the country? Do you guys have that information? I was just curious.
I think we see similar trends across the country. We calculated that just using the data in our region. We do know that there's a lot of data out there about when a pedestrian is hit by a vehicle at going at different speeds, how likely they are to survive. So if they're hit going 20 miles an hour, 90% of the time that pedestrian is going to survive, versus 30, it goes down to, is it 60 or 40? 40% of the time they're going to survive. And, decreasing as the speed goes up there. So that's, obviously an element of it there. And that's something that we've seen, nationally and internationally as well.
Yeah. Do folks have other questions or observations, or just anything you want to know about anything that we've brought up tonight? Any questions that you have, we would be happy to answer them. at this time, or if you have stories you wanted to share or concerns you wanted to share.
I have two questions. The first is there any correlation with the number of pedestrians and cyclists that have been in accidents with the number of pedestrians and cyclists out there now? In other words, are the numbers increasing together? And then the second question is, has there been any research done on drivers? Has the rate of accidents gone up with the advent of smartphones?
Oh, well, I'm not a data person. I know what I want to answer to that question. Do either of you have data on that at this point? If you don't right now, that's fine. There are things we can look into.
Yeah, those are both really interesting things to look at. I don't have an answer to either one of those.
Yeah, I think.
But I'm sure, yeah, your suspicion is probably right about the second one. And in terms of cyclists and pedestrians on the roads, we could look at like census commute to work data and see how that's changing for the region.
It can be a little tricky to get an accurate number of how many people are walking and biking. There's a lot more data around cars. But there's some estimates for that.
Yeah. My suspicion would be that it's probably disproportionate again, and that it's not an increase in cyclists and pedestrians that's causing more crashes, but probably cars getting bigger and yeah.
Okay, I'm not. Oh, I am seeing a question. Yes, I think that people are getting up to leave, but they're just going to the podium.
No, so thanks for coming. My question is this is a really good thing that you came and take all this input, but where does it go from here? My personal experience, I've had two situations, one in Cumberland, where there was what I thought was a dangerous intersection, and started looking at it and saw that the signage was just completely inappropriate. There was a sign for a three-way intersection upcoming that 20 years ago it became a four-way intersection. So I brought that to the attention of the town, and it seems like it went into a black hole. There was another situation here in Yarmouth where you suggest something to improve an intersection, and it goes into a black hole. So where does this go from here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's actually, I have a little bit of that on the last slide. Where it goes from here is we try to collect all this data and continue talking with people and analyzing it and getting it all down and figuring out what parts of the region we would highlight and prioritize for changes and get these into the action plan. And so the process for the action plan is kind of what I have outlined here. We're hoping to have a first draft of it in February, March 2023, where we would get more feedback from the public and from our policy board and from an advisory panel that we have helping us through this process. Come up with a final draft in May or June, and then hopefully get it adopted by the region between June and August. And one of the reasons we have this particular timeline is because there is money, and funding is often one of the hardest pieces, right? So people identify something they want to change. They might even get to the point where they get money for a plan, but then there's no money to implement it. And so that is a struggle that people face. In terms of just changing your sign, that's not a big funding thing, but there are a lot of people that own the road, right? There's a town that has an interest. There might be Maine Department of Transportation. You might have to then talk with, everything has to go through a public process. So sometimes things do get mired down. What we hope to accomplish with this is an action plan that really clearly outlines some of the things we can do short-term, mid-term, and long-term to begin making these roads safer and getting our fatalities and serious injuries down to zero. When they're in a plan, it's easy for people to refer back to them, and when they're in the plan, they become eligible for funding to implement them. And that money is available for the next 4 years, so both in in September-ish, 23, 24, 25, 26, people will be able to apply for this money to get the funding to implement the things that are in the action plan. So the action plan's the first step, and then the action can lead to implementation. So that is the hope. I do understand that things, yes, sometimes get mired. Sometimes they're still in the works and you don't even know, but it just takes a really long time. I mean, think about Boston and the Big Dig. It's still happening. But one day they'll get there. And the interesting thing is that whoever is there when it's finally done is going to get all the credit, even though it's been coming for a really long time. So don't lose faith and keep highlighting the things that need to be changed. We'll get what we can into this action plan, and then we'll get, hopefully, some folks to get some funding to make some things happen. Yeah.
Hello. Okay.
Yeah, they all work.
When you say people can apply for the money to implement, who would be these people?
Yeah, so the federal government has the money that they are distributing for this, and there are eligible entities. So municipalities are eligible, planning organizations are eligible, tribal governments are eligible. If there's a special government or a district, they're eligible. They have this all written out in their notice of funding opportunity. But really, it's nice that individual towns can do this. And Maine Department of Transportation is not eligible for those funds. But they can be a partner on an application because often they are involved with the roadways. So that's who can apply. And so, yes, if you are a citizen, a bike ped advocate, then you want to talk to your counselors, you want to talk to your town representatives, and you want to get your town on board. All right, class dismissed. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And please do follow our progress at that website and send other people there to work with our map. We have an online map. We have a survey. Thank you.